Hey everyone, Clio here, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about Dawnshard by Brandon Sanderson. So, as you can tell, this is a little bit of a more like casual sit down because I'm extremely cold. I need my blanket, I need my tea, and I also changed my like framing a little bit just because I wanted to have a Christmas tree in this shot. But so let's talk Dawnshard. So Dawnshard is a novella within the Stormlight Archive, so it is part of the epic fantasy series that Brandon Sanderson is currently working on. The series will contain 10 books, but we don't know how many novellas because these do not count for the 10-book series. In any case, this is the second novella that has been published. It is not yet physically available, but you can have it as an ebook, and probably in the near future there will also be physical copies of this novella available. So this is preferably to be read between books 3 and 4, so between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. However, you are definitely able to read it after Rhythm of War. As a novella, you might decide that it's not crucial to read it, and that's definitely the case with the first novella, Edge Dancer. However, with Dawnshard, I think you're probably gonna want to read it, and that is because there are some revelations made in this one, and there's something taking place within this one that I won't go into in this review because it's spoilers, but that probably is going to have repercussions for the main story of Stormlight Archive itself. So I would definitely highly recommend that you do read this novella if you want to read the entirety of the Stormlight Archive. Now in this one we are following mainly two POVs. We're mainly following Lopen and Risen, who have both had limited screen time in the Stormlight Archive as a whole. So Lopen is part of Bridge 4 and he is accompanying Risen on this mission. And Risen, she is a character who we've mainly been introduced to throughout interludes, and she also played a major role within the showdown sequence in Oathbringer. Now, Risen and Lopen are joined by a crew to go and sail to the island of Emia, which you've already seen introduced in one of the interludes in Oathbringer. It is a sort of mysterious island to which people have tried to go there because there are certain legends about huge riches to be found at this island. However, it is impossible to reach it, or at least to reach this particular island in the region of Emia. And so we've already seen a little bit of a failed attempt in one of the interludes in Oathbringer. So I was immediately very much intrigued when I found out about that, because that is one of my favorite interludes within the Stormlight Archive so far. So I very much wanted to go back to this island and hopefully explore it a little bit more. Now I will say that this novella is one of the books that has taken me the longest to get into in terms of Brandon Sanderson's books, because usually I know a lot of people usually complain about the slow start to Brandon Sanderson's works, but I don't personally have any sort of experience with that. You know, I also just like character-focused books a whole lot, so I don't necessarily need a lot of action to be able to get drawn into a story. However, with this one I did struggle at the beginning, and I think it has to do with the fact that we are traveling on a ship for the first half of this book. And it is not the first time that we are traveling on a ship within the Stormlight Archive where I find my reading pace to be slacking. So in Oathbringer and in Rhythm of War there are two sequences in which we travel on a ship in Shadesmar, and both of those parts in the books have been parts in which I found myself struggling to get through it. So I don't know whether that is specific to Brandon Sanderson. I definitely know I also had problems with the ship passage sequence in Six of Crows, for example, so maybe I just really don't like traveling by ship in books. But I will say that that meant that I had a quite slow start into it, and I definitely did have it for like the first 45% of this book or anything like that, but it definitely pays out. It definitely picks up a whole lot afterwards, but as a result I'm also only going to give this like 4 stars because it did definitely hinder my enjoyment at the beginning of this book. I did definitely struggle through it, and I cannot really ignore the fact that half of this book was difficult for me to get through. I will, however, say that I definitely enjoyed the entire showdown in the second half of this novel a whole lot, and I definitely enjoyed the physical disability representation a lot as well. So if you've seen my Rhythm of War review, you might know that I am not a fan of physical disability representation within Stormlight Archive. So it is one of those cases where it is possible to heal physical disabilities through Stormlight, which is something that I am not down for because it is something that happens a lot of the time. It's a little bit of an ableist view on disability, because it kind of implies that, you know, the only way forward for the storyline of a disabled character is to heal them, or that the ideal way for a story like that to progress is to heal them. So it is something that happens quite often within fantasy, for example, and so I would have loved to see Brandon Sanderson tackle it a little bit differently. But there is a little bit of a difference here, though I also don't really get behind that, and that is that if your physical disability has been with you for a very long time, then it won't be curable, because it has become part of who you are. And this is the case for one of the characters within this story, so that character can no longer be healed. So she has lost the use of her legs, she is paralyzed from the waist down, and I very much love that Brandon Sanderson sought the aid of people who actually have this condition in real life to make sure that what he was putting in the book was good representation and that it wasn't harmful content, for example. And so as somebody with a physical disability, but I do have a very different one, mind you, I did definitely enjoy recognizing part of my reality within this story, for example, and I love the places it went and how it was very much emphasizing the need of, you know, tools or aids that can help people be more mobile when they've lost certain abilities, for example. So our character has lost the use of her legs, and throughout this one we're kind of exploring the way in which we can get a sort of like wheelchair to work within the world of Stormlight Archive. But I definitely loved looking at that. It wasn't like a major part of the story, it was just a little bit of a sort of like side element to the story, but it was so beautiful to see how he was showcasing how these little changes here and there to make this ship more accessible to somebody who has reduced mobility had such a big impact on an emotional level on the person itself. You know, they no longer need to constantly rely on others to be able to move around, for example, and how that opens up such a world of possibilities again to this person. Another thing that I definitely loved Brandon Sanderson doing within this story was the main motivation of our protagonist to go to this island is because she has a pet companion who isn't feeling great, and he is originally from this island, and so she goes there to try and find a cure for him. So it is taking this character who traditionally by society is seen as somebody who needs to be taken care of, and it's giving her the caring role. It's making her take care of somebody else. So I just thought that that was beautiful symbolism and a beautiful role that he was giving to this character within this one. And you know, the book is just filled with those type of beautiful moments. For me personally, knowing quite a little bit about this reality, it did sometimes feel like there was just like the disability representation was just a little bit too blatant, too in your face, too obvious. But that also has to do with the formatting of a novella. So in a 200-page novella, he cannot really spread out those things the way he would be able to in a 1,200-page novel, where we're switching between a lot more POVs than just these two POVs. So definitely just think that that is a little bit of the formatting, and that it's probably something that people who don't have a disability won't really have this qualm. And so I will also not have that qualm, because I definitely want people to be exposed to this type of disability representation a lot more. What I also very much loved was how the character of Risen was first introduced to us as an assistant or like an apprentice to become a merchant. And so when she had her accident and she lost the use of her leg, she really started to doubt whether she would ever be able to, because merchants do need to travel a lot within this world, and so she thought she was never going to be able to fulfill that role anymore. And so she has been doubting herself and her role as a merchant so much that it was so wonderful to see within this book how often her skill and her knowledge as a merchant were put to use in interesting and new ways, and how like Brandon Sanderson is so great at taking something like that and putting it to a new level. You know, at the very end of this book, there's this giant negotiation scene with enormous stakes, and I just very much love how Brandon Sanderson does that, and how this character, who by society would often be reduced just to her physical disability, has really shown how that is not what defines her, and that is not what is most valuable about her. Yeah, I think that that is more or less what I'm going to be able to say about this book. I will say that I also wasn't the biggest fan of Lopen within this one, especially within the first half of this story. But I will say that I definitely loved where Brandon Sanderson was taking this character within the final chapters of this book. I do think it's an interesting place to put a character like Lopen, or an interesting realization to have the character of Lopen go through. I will say that after having read this, I'm quite eager to dive back into Rhythm of War, because there's some major things that take place at the end of this novel that just really make you wonder whether there are like hints back to that within Rhythm of War that I would now kind of pick up on that totally went by me. So very much enjoyed this one in the end. As I said, I gave it a 4-star rating because I did have difficulties getting into the story at the beginning. I definitely did find it difficult to get through that first half of the story, with the pacing being a lot slower and there being a little bit more of, you know, you obviously have the initial takeoff of the story, but also with that entire traveling sequence that really didn't work that well for me, that really didn't grab my attention. But the final half of this book, once we reach the destination, is so worthwhile. I guess the words journey before destination don't really work for me. Clearly I need to get to my destination to be able to enjoy it. But so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know down below if you are interested in reading Dawnshard, or maybe if you've already read it. Do mind you, no spoilers. Make sure that you really mark them well if you want to give me spoilers within the comments down below. And then hopefully see you guys for a future video. Bye!